Chapter 58 Awakening. Several days later. BB's eyes snapped wide open at the same time that he gave a loud scream of fear. His eyes darted back and forth, frantic, but the world appeared as nothing more than one big blur to him. His mind racing, his lungs desperate for air, he tried to sit up and focus. He immediately regretted his decision, and his cry of fear turned into one of pain. The entire side of his barrel exploded into white-hot agony, almost causing the air to flee his lungs. Then, to his confusion, he felt several pairs of hands coming to rest on him, and soothing voices were just audible through the pounding of his heart in his ears. Slowly, ever so slowly, he began to calm down. Reality reasserted itself, and he gave off a quiet sigh of relief.
Nightmares again.
He blinked his eyes and really took in the world around him. The first thing he saw were the faces of the Crusaders hovering over him, worried and concerned to match their auras. But oddly, there was also a lot of pink mixed in, as if they very rapidly went from being happy to really afraid. He blinked again and looked past them, trying to piece together where he was. By the looks of things, they were in his bedroom. The overhead light was on, bathing them all in a soft glow and making the room feel warm and inviting. The only thing that stood out to BB as particularly odd was the first aid kit resting next to his pillow.
"Baby? Are you awake?"
Applebloom asked in a timid voice, the only one of the teenagers to not pull her hand away after he calmed down. BB nodded his head, still groggy.
Yeah, I'm awake.
He reached one of his hooves up to rub at his eyes as he spoke.
What happened?
Scootaloo stood tall all of a sudden, her aura lighting up with eager excitement.
I'll go tell Eventide,
she proclaimed simply, before turning and leaving the room at a brisk pace, leaving the door wide open behind her. BB watched her go, confused. He let his head fall back onto his pillow and focused his eyes on his remaining two friends.
What happened to me?
Applebloom and Sweetie Belle shared an uneasy look. After a few seconds of silence, Sweetie smiled at him and leaned closer.
"You've been unconscious for a few days, BB. We've all been really worried about you. Do you remember what happened?"
The farmer asked, finally backing away to give BB his space. She contented herself with sitting on the edge of the bed, while Sweetie chose to get down on her knees on the floor and rest her elbows on the blankets. BB's muzzle scrunched up as he thought back, trying to call up the last thing he could remember.
I remember getting to the top of the mountain with Dad. We played up there for a while to celebrate, and we came home. I called you, and we went for a walk through the forest together.
"Still so sweet,"
Sweetie cooed under her breath, casting a mischievous wink at Applebloom. Applebloom pouted. BB ignored their antics for the time being.
After that, I remember we sat down somewhere for a little while. I remember it started to rain, and...
His frown deepened, and he gazed helplessly at his friends.
Nothing. I don't remember anything after that.
Applebloom looked down, her aura flickering with disappointment.
"I see. I was kind of hoping y'all would remember so I wouldn't have to tell you."
Tell me what?
She sighed and looked into BB's eyes.
"When you went to stand up, it must have been too much for you. Your legs gave out. You started gasping like you just ran a marathon wearing a corset.
She shuddered, and BB's eyes widened when he saw her aura darken with vestigial dread and horror.
You fell over the edge we were sitting on. I thought you'd fly to stop yourself, but you didn't. You landed on a sharp rock jutting up from the ground. It put a real big hole in your side. Shattered your cotton, too.
A hole in my side?
BB echoed quietly, his eyes trailing down his body. Carefully, not wanting to cause himself any more pain, he peeled back his blankets with his magic to get a better look at himself. His entire torso was wrapped up in white bandages, and a small red stain was on his side where he had felt the pain earlier. His dark face turned a few shades more pale as the blood drained from it, and he gulped before lowering the blankets.
How bad is it?
Oh, you're going to be fine,
Sweetie assured him with a smile.
Fluttershy and Applebloom fixed you up, and we've all been coming by every day to change your bandages and make sure you have company when your dad's at work.
BB relaxed somewhat from the assurance, and a tiny smile appeared on his face.
Really? Thank you, girls.
Least we could do.
Applebloom replied softly.
You're our friend, right? Friends help each other.
It was at that time that Scootaloo returned, Eventide following close behind her. His eyes locked onto BB, and his aura went from shocked to relieved. Glowing like the morning sun, Eventide slid to a stop by the bed and got down on his knees, with Sweetie scooting to one side to give him some room. He stayed still for a second, his entire body relaxing, and a smile spreading on his lips. "BB," he breathed, hesitantly reaching out. BB returned the smile.
Hey, Dad.
His smile faded, and he looked down.
I'm sorry I got myself hurt. I should have been more careful.
Eventide's smile disappeared as well. "BB, no, don't you dare apologize. It wasn't your fault, you hear me? I'm just..." He reached out and took one of BB's hooves in his hand. "I'm just glad you're awake and okay. How do you feel?" BB squirmed in place for a second, then winced and sucked in a breath when his broken side protested the movement with another white-hot spear of pain.
Ow! 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 Ow!
Yep, guess that answers that.
Applebloom mumbled with a roll of her eyes. The mirth was short-lived, and she leveled a hard look at the basement bug.
Baby, hold still. The skin's mostly healed up, but your cotton's still got a big old hole in it. Until that closes up, you gotta try not to move too much. Doctor's orders.
Doctor's orders? But you're not a doctor.
Scootaloo pointed out with a frown. "Aunt's orders, then." Eventide silenced both of them before that debate could go anywhere. His eyes were still trained on his son. BB, once the pain died down, tilted his head to one side.
Aunt's orders?
Eventide nodded. "Yeah. Fluttershy came running as soon as she heard you were hurt. She and Applebloom worked on you for a long time. Stitched you up, bandaged your wound, disinfected it. They saved your life." BB's eyes widened and drifted over to look at his best friend. She blushed slightly from the praise and looked away, her aura flaring up a little with embarrassment. Sweetie Belle looked back and forth between them for a few moments, before her eyes settled on Applebloom.
So, how long until he's recovered, do you think?
Applebloom focused on her pale friend, eager for the opportunity to step out of the spotlight.
Oh, I don't know for sure. Fluttershy's best guess from what Sunset's told her is that it'll probably be around another month before he's all better.
A month?
BB suddenly shrieked, his eyes flying wide open and his good mood taking a very inconvenient vacation.
But...
Eventide's expression hardened at his son's pouting. "Hey, a month in bed is better than being dead."
Oh, hey, that rhymed.
Sweetie Belle absently pointed out under her breath. BB's face contorted into a very displeased grimace. But no matter how much he disliked the situation, he had to admit defeat. He let off a quiet sigh and set his head back down fully on his pillow.
Oh, I guess you're right. It still sucks, though.
He grumbled. Yeah, it does. Eventide agreed with a small nod of his head. A comfortable silence fell over the room, and despite his condition, BB felt himself starting to relax into his bed a little more. He still felt pretty sleepy, probably due to the nightmare interrupting his rest. For a moment, he openly considered closing his eyes and letting himself go back to sleep. From the sounds of it, there wasn't much else he could do for a while anyway. But then the bitter taste of apprehension and anxiety tickled his tongue, chasing away such notions. With his muzzle scrunching up in revulsion, BB looked over to find the source of the negative emotions. To his surprise, it was Eventide. The man, despite the smile on his face, was radiating a thin mist of anxiety, far more than the others. It was subtle and faint, but it was plenty to be concerning. BB blinked and shifted just enough to get a better look.
Dad? Is something wrong?
He asked carefully, his voice low. Just like that, Eventide's smile vanished, and the mist flared up a little. He stared at BB in total silence for a moment, before slowly turning to face the Crusaders, who all looked more confused than anything. Hey, girls, would you mind going upstairs for a little while? I'd like to talk to my son in private for a few minutes.
Oh, sure.
Abelblum acknowledged quietly with a nod of her head.
We should probably be getting home anyway. It's getting late and I still got some back-to-school shopping to do.
School. So lame.
Scootaloo complained under her breath before giving BB a cocky grin and a thumbs up.
We'll see you around, Beebs. Get better soon, yeah?
Don't call him Beebs, it sounds weird.
Sweetie Belle chastised, while rising to her feet and heading for the door.
Not any weirder than you calling me Scoots.
Shut up.
Applebloom rolled her eyes and gave the pale teenager a lighthearted slap on the back.
Ignore her. I'll whomper and smash tomorrow.
Bring it, cowgirl.
Ignoring Scootaloo's challenging look, Applebloom turned to face BB one more time.
I'll be seeing you, little guy. Get well soon, okay?
BB waved back at them as the Crusaders disappeared from the room.
I will. Bye, guys.
He called out before they disappeared entirely from view, leaving him and his father alone. Eventide watched them go as well, a small flicker of amusement sliding into his aura from their antics. Those girls. You know, they've been coming down here every day to sit around your bed and think happy thoughts about you so you don't go hungry while you're out. It's kind of a funny picture, really. BB's eyes turned back to look at his father, and the two made eye contact. Eventide was quiet for a second, his brow furrowing. After a moment, he nodded to himself and started talking. Some things happened while you were out, and, someone learned about you. BB's heart began to beat just a little faster, his chest twisting with apprehension.
Who?
Eventide gave him a reassuring smile while reaching out to pat him on the head. Don't worry, we can trust her. She's Fluttershy's friend. You remember Sunset? BB's muzzle scrunched up, the faintest tickling of a memory from long ago crawling into his mind.
Sunset Shimmy?
In response to that, Eventide lifted a fist to his lips in a desperate, failed attempt to stop himself from laughing. After a few seconds of chuckling into his knuckles, he pulled himself together. He leaned back and took a deep breath to quell any more laughs and continued. Sunset Shimmer, not Shimmy. BB blushed.
Oh. Whoops.
The man shook his head in exasperation. You've never really gotten that name right, have you? Well, anyways, she saw you. She knows you exist. And she knows what you are. The blush evaporated from BB's face the moment he heard those words. He froze, his heart leaping up into his throat. All other thoughts were being shoved aside in favor of focusing on that one statement. He blinked several times before he found his voice and spoke, his words quiet and unbelieving.
She knows what I am?
Eventide nodded. Yep. According to her, you're something called a changeling. You're from another world called Equestria, and Sunset knows this because, apparently, that's where she's from too. She came here through some kind of magic portal or something like that. That's also where all of the magic that pops up around town comes from. Do you remember all the times the school exploded? BB nodded. That's equestrian magic. BB slowly tilted his head to one side, trying to digest this information. For as long as he had been alive, he had had no clue as to what he actually was, no clue where he came from or what he was called, or if there was anything else like him in the whole world. All he knew was what he had managed to figure out through trial and error, and the nickname that had given rise to his true name. He was the basement bug. He was BB. And BB was a changeling, a creature from another world called Equestria.
So, I'm an alien?
He eventually asked, his head tilting the other way. Eventide sat upright, his brow furrowed. He lifted a finger and opened his mouth as if to utter some sort of rebuttal, froze for a second, then lowered the finger and closed his mouth. You know what? I never really thought of it like that, but yeah, I guess you are an alien, he acknowledged, starting to laugh again. BB grinned happily as his father's aura lit up with the golden glow of amusement and entertainment. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, he opened his mouth and began to drink in the emotion, enjoying the biting taste that swam down his throat. If he had to compare the flavor of amusement to something, it would have to be the strongly flavored candies that pop and snap in the mouth, sweet and sour and very exciting. There was still that small bit of anxiety in the aura, though, and the settled taste it imparted on the meal was enough to draw BB's attention again. He swallowed down the last of his meal and affixed Eventide with questioning eyes.
So, why aren't you more happy about this? This is good news, isn't it?
Eventide paused, his smile faltering. He looked away for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. Well, yeah, it is good news. But there's more to it than that. BB's eyes widened when he saw the apprehension growing just a little bit denser. He lifted his head.
What do you mean?
Eventide took a deep breath, then sat upright. For a long moment he was perfectly still, as if trying to psych himself up. Sunset Shimmer... She found your birth parents. Silence. Had he heard that right? BB tilted his head, his eyes wide and his wings wavering against the bed on his back.
What?
He breathed, not able to truly grasp the words that had just been said to him. Your mom and dad. The changelings who gave birth to you, Eventide continued, lowering his head a little. Sunset asked a few people in Equestria once she found out about you. I got a call from her this morning. She said that your parents were found. And they want to meet you. Mom and Dad. Bibi had a mother. Of course, thinking about it, it was obvious that he had one. He knew enough about the birds and the bees to know his egg didn't just pop into existence out of nowhere, but he hadn't given much thought to the absent figure in his life for a long time. He had long ago made peace with the idea that he would never get to meet her or his birth father, that Eventide, Fluttershy, and Budo would always be the only family he'd have. But now he knew she was out there, and she knew about him, and now she wanted to meet him? Along with his dad? Other dad, Bibi reminded himself. He had 2 dads now. This was gonna get confusing. He could tell.
They want to see me?
He whispered, more to himself so he could hear the words again, to make sure they were what he had actually heard. Yeah. The plan is to head over to Equestria and meet up with them once you're all better. I'm not sure how we're gonna do it, though. I think we can just go through the portal that Sunset used. I don't know. She'll explain it all when we get to that point. Eventide said, before shifting around and smiling at his son. But from what I've been told, they were really happy and excited to learn about you. And they really, really want to meet you. Bibi didn't reply. Not immediately. Then, after several seconds of contemplative silence, his face lit up with a bright smile, and his wings buzzed on his back.
Wow. I have a mom,
he whispered before looking up at Eventide.
I want to meet them too. I have so many questions. Do you know what they're like? Do I look a lot like them? What are their names?
Eventide's anxiety began to fade from his aura, Bibi's energy and happiness no doubt being contagious. With a smile, the man stood from the bed and crouched down by the bedside to be closer to his son. I have absolutely no idea. I didn't think to ask when on the phone, but hey, we'll find out together when we see them, yeah? Bibi beamed, then pouted when his injured side throbbed to remind him of his less than stellar physical condition.
But I'm still hurt. And Applebloom said I'm gonna be in bed for a month.
Eventide's smile grew. He reached out and stroked Bibi's neck with the tips of his fingers, right at the base of his fin.
Oh, cheater.
While Bibi succumbed to the off switch, Eventide gave his answer. Well, that just means you'll have something to look forward to, now doesn't it? And plenty of time to think about all the questions you want to ask them. Bibi managed to regain enough of his faculties to sluggishly nod at the suggestion.
I guess.
Any other words devolved into a pleased chitter, and he craned his neck to lean into the fingers. And then Eventide pulled his hand away, drawing a long and disappointed whine from the abandoned basement bug. He smirked and rose to his feet. So, you gonna be okay on your own for a little while? I have a call or two to make, and, Fluttershy's gonna want to know you've woken up, Bibi wanted to protest being left alone, but when his eyes settled on the baby monitor settled on his bedside table, the words died in his throat. As true as it was that he was not a baby anymore, the old plastic device meant he was only ever a shout away from bringing Eventide down if he needed him. So with that comfort in mind, he gave a nod.
I'll be okay. Tell Aunt Fluttershy I said hi.
Eventide nodded and turned for the door. Sure thing. Holler if you need anything, Kay?
Okay.
With that, Eventide left the room, though he left the door open. Bibi watched him go. then let his head come back down to rest on his pillow. He adjusted himself a little bit, his mind wandering back to the idea of getting to meet his birth parents. His smile turned dreamy at the idea, his eyes slowly drifting closed.
I'm gonna have a mom,
he whispered to himself, the last words he uttered before sleep took him back. A little nap would probably do him some good, after all.